So here's a tough one for some people to digest, and this was a tough one for me to accept, and it took me a long time. But for the people out there that are going through something that maybe you get something out of my videos, that's awesome. But there's a reason that we don't admit what's going on in our heads. There's a reason we don't like to talk about it. There's a reason we don't want to confess to certain things. There's a reason we don't want to be discovered. It's because some of the things that you are afraid of happening are going to happen, right? Sometimes people are not going to understand. Sometimes they're not going to care. Sometimes they're not going to help you. So I don't want this to sound like a bleak video, but it's just a fact that you've got to kind of get comfortable with. And once you accept it and you know it's going to happen, it'll soften the blow a lot. I promise that's what happened. Sorry, that's what would have happened to me if I'd known some of this stuff, because accepting it was a very difficult thing. So when I ended up in hospital in 2018, I said to the cops that picked me up, I said I was in the military. As you know, part of the conversation we were having, they're asking a few questions and whatnot. So then part of their procedure is to go and inform the military, and they find out who I am, because obviously when you're in the military, you got access to weapons, right? I didn't think I said that I was in special operations, but that means that I've got access to explosives, lots of weapons, military working dogs, secret information, whatever it is, right? Access to certain places. So that's even more of a reason that my work should have found out, and they did. So what happened? I went to the hospital, had the doctor come in, a guy that I was familiar with, and he was like, yeah, man, like, he said it a bit gentler than this, but he said, you've got to, like, you're medically downgraded. We can't give you your weapons back. You can't be a breacher. I think that at that time the dogs were considered a weapon or equipment or some sort of thing that they were like, yeah, like we can't have you working directly with the dogs, because I was an assault dog handler at the time. And I couldn't work with the dogs. I couldn't use my weapons, couldn't do anything with explosives, radios, that type of stuff. Because at that time, I was seen as a liability. They were like, well, you've just tried to take your own life. If we give you a weapon, what's to say that you won't turn it on yourself? And that is true, and there's a reason that they did that, and I don't begrudge that reason. But hearing that and then having to accept it and then go through the reality of that was a tough thing for me, because my weapon and the explosives in my military working dog and, my equipment or whatever was a big part of my identity. It was who I was. I would put that stuff on every day, and I would go and do things that I enjoyed doing with people that I respected, cared about and admired and wanted to, be like or impress. So to lose all that was a big blow to me. But what you have to accept is that there is a reason some of those things are going to happen. Now, some of the harder things to accept were that some people just didn't care. They didn't care because they didn't know you that well. They've seen it before. Maybe they, were a sociopath or whatever. But in that whole process, I think there were two of the hundreds of people that I dealt with. There were like two people that were malicious, right? Everybody else was either indifferent because they're living their own life, dealing with their own stuff, or they weren't quite sure what to do, right? Because it's just not in their wheelhouse. They're not a psychologist. They don't know how to deal with my stuff. And they're a little bit afraid to don't talk to Tom. He might fucking spontaneously kill himself, whatever they thought. So accepting that and coming to terms with it was a very difficult thing. So what I want you to know is I know why you hide the stuff that's going on in your head, because you don't want to have that thing taken away from you that you value. You don't want to have that part of you isolated from yourself, that part of your identity removed from you that gives you that worth and that satisfaction is maybe the reason that you get out of bed in the morning and the thing that is keeping you going. But if there's one thing I can tell you and assure you is that having that stuff removed, the reason why you don't want to have it removed is very important for you in a good way. Having my weapons taken away, the dog, the explosives, my equipment, was ultimately a good thing, because as much as I loved it and that wasn't the cause of my issues, it was a divorce and long-standing things from childhood and whatever, that stuff was only adding to my stress. And having it taken away meant that I now had a lot more space to go and deal with what I had to, because the fun of running around shooting things and blowing things up with my mates was awesome, but it was not going to be the thing that helped me recover. Taking that break, having that space away so that I could then go and get back to it later and do it properly was the important thing that I had to learn. And, I made lots of mistakes in that process. I tried to go back too early, didn't do it right, and then fucked it and then lost it all again. Hence why my military career ended. I got the flick from the dogs. And then I didn't get into Queensland Police when I applied after I left the military. So I know why you hide it, and there is a reason. And sometimes that reason is going to be true, but accept that that reason is for a good reason and that it's okay, right? Because you and your recovery and what you do later is far more important than what you lose short term.